Happy Friday, David McElfresh here with another Friday Fresh Take. This week I'm talking about one of my favorite topics, retirement and how to use real estate as a tool to retire early. Huge topic. Everybody is talking about different ideas, different strategies, different trends and ways to try to retire early and get ahead. Here's the current status right now, at least in the United States. Average male retires around age 64. Average female retires around the age of 62. And from a median income standpoint, most people have about $200,000 saved up at the age of retirement. So not a great situation. You're basically working for 40 years and then you've got a little bit over $200,000 left over for your retirement situation. Tons of talking heads, really smart people have talked about strategies for getting ahead and approaching retirement. One of my favorite podcasters I actually listened to a few weeks ago had this interesting strategy. They said, hey, if you want to have $1 million in your bank account in just 10 years, all you have to do is save $36,000 a year. So $3,000 a month. Oh, and by the way, you also have to have a spouse that's doing the exact same thing. So between the two of you, $72,000 a year. Invest that in the stock market. And by the end of 10 years, with normalized returns, you'll have $1 million. And I sat there and I thought, that is the farthest thing away from what is approachable from a strategy standpoint. The average American or median income right now is $44,000. There's no way that somebody could take $36,000 of that 44 and invest that into the stock market on a regular basis. So I'm going to come in with my own strategy that I think is approachable, gives people a strategy and an idea for how to retire early, and makes it really, really approachable for the masses, kind of the average person. So let's dive into it, and I'm going to talk about some of the numbers and the strategies on how to make this happen. Okay, so this is how this works. Let's walk through the numbers, talk about how things are going to start. We are assuming that you are starting this process at age 22. So you've got 18 years to go through this process and retire. During this process, we're using the strategy that I like to refer to as the real estate leapfrog. If you're not super familiar, down in the show notes, I'll leave a link for another video where I really explain it. But basically, we're buying a property as an owner-occupied property, very minimum down payment. You're going to live in it for a few years, and then as soon as you get a chance, you're going to move out, turn that property into a rental, and you're going to buy a new property that you're going to live in. So with this strategy, again, we're starting at age 22. We're going to buy with a minimum down payment, okay? Obviously, most people in their early 20s don't have a ton of money for down payment, and we want to take advantage of that or really understand that piece, okay? We're going to buy a new property as soon as our rent will cover expenses. This is a biggie. We're only staying in a property until it's about year 4 where we hit the right equity number, where we say, okay, the amount of expenses that we would have every month, insurance, taxes, mortgage, any sort of fixes, capital expenditures, those are all now covered by the expected rent that we're going to get. And then at the end of this, when we hit age 40 in 18 years, we're actually going to sell 2 of those properties to take care of all of the mortgages and own 2 properties free and clear. So it's going to be a really interesting strategy for you guys to watch here. Now, here are the assumptions that we're working with. Every single property out of the 4 that we're buying, they are $450,000. Okay, that's the purchase price. And we're using a minimum down payment of 5%. So that's at $22,000 roughly that you have to bring. Now, every single time you come in, you're buying this property as an owner occupant. Again, I talked about that in the other video, but better interest rates, better loan terms, better down payment opportunities, all that kind of good stuff. And during this process, the one thing that's important, and I'll mention this, is that you are saving about $450 a month towards your next down payment, towards your next purchase. So you don't have to invest anything in stocks and bonds or anything like that. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor, so don't take this all as strategy, but this is how I might approach it to make this strategy work. Okay, so here's how this works. For the very first home in the first 4 years. After 4 years, let's say you bought the home, you paid your $22,000. After 4 years, you've now paid down the mortgage by $35,000. Okay, so your outstanding mortgage has definitely gone down. Now, the cool thing is that home is also appreciated by $85,000. So your equity has increased roughly $120,000 between these two numbers, which is pretty cool. So once your equity gets to that point where you've reached about the 25% mark, which is right here, you can remove what's called PMI. Most of the time when you have a low down payment loan, you're going to have private mortgage insurance. It's an extra $50, $7,500 a month that you're paying. Now you can remove that. And now you've hit the mark where you can probably move out, and your rent is now going to cover most of your expenses. Now, again, I want to remind you that during those 4 years, you're saving up about $450 per month for the next down payment of the second property. Again, I know $450 isn't a small amount, but when you're comparing it to some of these other investment gurus who are talking about investing $1,000, $2,000, $6,000 a month in the stock market, $450 is much more reasonable, and it's kind of like a side gig that you might do, 1 day a week to try and earn that much money. So that's the plan. That's how we get to home number one. You're literally just going to rinse and repeat that process for homes 2, 3, and 4. So after year 8, you're going to move out of the second home and you're going to buy home number 3. After year 12, you're going to move out of the third home and buy home number 4. And so as we get to this process, again, we're just going to repeat this after years 8 and 12. Once you get to the fourth property, you can literally sit back and just wait and do whatever you like. You can stay in that property for as long as you want. At a point where the property is going to cover its own expenses with rent, you could move out and go rent yourself another place. You could go buy another place. It is totally up to you how you want to approach that. And then the beauty of this is once we hit year 18, we're going to be able to sell the first and the second properties to pay off the remaining loan balances. So let's dive in and just look at the numbers to explain how this is going to work. Okay, so we won't get into too much nitty gritty with numbers here, but basically what we're doing is we're tracking the equity in each one of our properties all the way through to year 18, okay? So right here, we've only got one property, so we've only got one property's equity to track. And you can see here we are tallying up the total equity of all of our properties. Here we purchased our second property, and so now we're adding the equity of these two properties together, and it's roughly $155,000. So this is what we're tracking for our total equity. Now in this section, this is where we're tracking the mortgages, the outstanding mortgages for all 4 of our properties. Right here you can see we've only got one property, $425,000 worth on the mortgage. So it's slowly going down until, boom, we buy the second property and then it jumps. Slowly goes down, and then here we buy a third property and then it jumps. And so as these numbers start to go down, what's interesting is this number starts to go up, and we are looking for this magic number right here where our total equity is higher than our outstanding mortgage right here. So this is right after, at the end of our 18 years, beginning of our 19th year. This is that magic moment where we can say, cool, we're going to sell these 2 properties, pay off these 2 properties, and now we've got about, probably $4,000, $4,500 of rent per property that we can now utilize to retire. If you could sat back and you said, hey, I'm going to make $8,000 to $9,000 per month in rent, and I can go use that for whatever I want. I can rent my own place. I can travel the world. I can do anything. That is a very, very freeing number. That's a pretty exciting proposition and opportunity. So that's what we're looking at right here. That's the plan. That's the strategy. And super, super excited about these numbers and how to get there. All right, so we just dove in and went through all of the numbers, figured out how the strategy works, and ultimately how you can retire by age 40. Now, there's definitely some assumptions that are not taken into account here. There's just no way to account for all the different variables and strategies. One thing that I didn't account for was potential increasing of rents over the 18 years. There's absolutely going to be an increase in rents for your properties, especially the ones that you buy early on as you go through in years 5 and 10 and 15 and such. So that's a bonus. That's something that we did not account for. The other thing that I didn't account for was your potential income increasing as you go through the years. That is likely going to happen, and it's going to be much easier for you to try to account for that extra $450 per month as you get older and older and your income increases. But just to be safe, I didn't want to include those numbers and try to make this as realistic as possible. So that said, there's some things on the other side that are going to be a little bit tricky, right? There are some people who will say, David, I don't want to move every 4 years. That doesn't sound fun. And I will say, I totally get it. But moving earlier on in your life is much easier. It's much more sustainable. You get to check out different neighborhoods. And with this strategy, you get to retire potentially 25 years earlier. So totally worth it to take a little bit of pain for a few couple of moves, as opposed to sitting and waiting to retire for another 25 years. The other thing that some people will bring up is, hey, David, I bought a house for $450,000 in year one. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford that same house in year 8, right? That house is going to appreciate and I'm going to be getting a different property. 100% true. That's going to happen. You can decide whether you want to, quote unquote, downsize and still buy a $450,000 place, or maybe your budget's gone up a little bit and you want to buy something that's worth 500 or 550. Totally up to you. Make the numbers work for your situation. The beauty of this is that it's a strategy and this is a template that can work for you. Here's ultimately what I love about real estate and about this strategy is if you compare this to stocks and bonds, you would have to buy $7,500 worth of stocks on a monthly basis. Okay, you would have to invest that much, or really $90,000 a year for 18 years to equate to what you are getting in this strategy. So would you rather have a little bit of pain and save up $450 a month? Or would you rather figure out a way to invest $7,500 a month? And it's really, really obvious when you look at those two situations, which one is, number one, more feasible and which one is absolutely more interesting and fun moving forward. So give me a holler, shoot me a message if you have questions about this or you want to talk about investing. Otherwise, have a rocking weekend. Cheers.